I spent most of January and February in their house on 29th Avenue, a more prosaic street you cannot imagine than 29th Avenue in San Francisco. Afternoons putting into boxes, dishes, photographs, clothes. Clothes are the hardest thing to put away. And I found among my mother's papers, my paper, a paper I had written when I was a high school senior. And I opened it and began to read. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful, and it was better than anything I can achieve now. It was brilliant, it was fresh, it was daring, it risked, it took chances with language. And I think to myself, I want to be 18 again. I want to write like an 18-year-old. Dear Oprah, life is a whole. There are things that the young know that the middle-aged are envious to remember. There are things that the old know that they learned from childhood. 2 years ago, I was on this podium. I was receiving an honorary degree. And 2 students had died in your company. 2, I think, in automobile accidents. I was horrified that nothing was said about their dying from the podium. I had known because a faculty member told me. The remarkable thing was that they were both graduated. That is, their names were called, and a member of the family came up to receive the degree. I was sitting next to an astronaut, a woman astronaut, and I had been spending the morning talking to her about what it is like to be an astronaut. And I was like an 8-year-old kid asking this 42-year-old woman, what is it like? And she got slightly bored, thinking that I was trying to pick her up. She said, you do not feel the thrust. It is so profound. It catches you and pushes you back in the seat. You hear the noise, like a river. The noise until the rocket disengages from the capsule, and then you are projected into space, into the quiet of space. And the brother of one of the men who had died, I think he died in the Southwest in an automobile accident, got up from this side of the room. He was not dressed in graduation attire, but he came up and he was presented with his brother's diploma. And he carried the diploma almost in a priestly manner off the stage. And one of his friends, or somebody I thought was one of his friends, was a mess of grief. And the ceremony went on, the cheering went on, the photographs went on. 2 years ago. And then she says, it is extraordinary, that silence when you are so far in space, that there is no sensory impression that corresponds to anything you have known on Earth. And later I met a woman, an old woman in a wheelchair, somebody's great-grandmother, and her hands were claws, but her eyes were green, so green. One of the things old people tell you is that they do not feel old, not inside. Their bodies collapse, their bodies give way, but they are still 21 years old, and they hate it when they are condescended to and treated like children, just as the 21-year-old hates it when he is condescended to and not dealt with as an adult. 2 years ago, I remember the old woman in her wheelchair. I remember her green eyes, the thrust of the jet, the silence, the young man carrying his brother's diploma. In middle age, I end up telling my parents, taking my parents, listening to my parents at clinics and hospitals for this or that ailment. My mother, especially my mother, ends up talking about childhood. The older she gets, the more feeble she gets, the more she remembers running as a child, the more she remembers Mexico as a girl, the more she remembers spring, and she is bent with age. In middle age, I end up invited to give a commencement address. I am the writer. I have written 3 books. My books are at a very distant corner of Borders Books, Latin American Studies. They are very far away from the books that I read and I loved as a young man. James Baldwin is over there on the other side of the room. He's in Black literature. D.H. Lawrence is in another section, a section called literature. I think that means white literature. When the lights are off at Borders Books, we all get together over by the espresso machine. But when the lights come on and the girl with a nose through her ring comes and turns on the coffee machine in the morning, we all go to our separate corners. In middle age, you get invited to tell young people about the future because you are already an elder. But what can I tell you? Except that you know now more things than I do. You are probably better writers than I am, and you will lose it. Life is a whole. At 4:30 this morning, I got up because I was discontent with the speech I was going to give you. I sat in my hotel room over the Kenyon Inn with the windows open. It was a warm spring morning. A car went by. Some kids were still up. What you do at 4:30 in the morning, I do not even know. I rewrote the speech. Then I rewrote that speech. What shall I tell you? What will you hear at 4 in the morning? I sat in my room and I remembered being a young man at 21 in my college dorm, and all those mornings, and I wrote term papers at 4 in the morning. They were due at 8 in the morning. And I had a roommate who snored like a dying horse. I could remember this morning the smell of that room. I can remember the sound of snoring. It was so close to me. Time is an illusion. But why is it that I cannot remember what the commencement speaker said when I was 21 years old? Thank you very much.